We hear from contractors all the time that I really don't have an hourly rate in my install department. We work on a gross margin per man day or a gross margin per man hour. And so we just simply put that overhead in, that gross margin that we need to recoup. And then we put a multiplier, a divisor on top of that, and that comes out with our job price. We don't have an hourly rate. Well, I hate to tell you, but yes, you do. And that is the topic of this week's Planning for Profit Minute. Now, one of the things that we gave, and I understand it, right? We look at it and go, well, I really don't have an hourly rate that I can enter into the software to create my projections. But again, if you're selling equipment, so you're installing, you have an hourly rate. Somehow in there, you're building it into the job that you're doing. I'll have some trades that, for example, electrical, we just have a certain dollar amount per outlet or a certain dollar amount per switch. It's not driven by an hourly rate. Well, ultimately, somewhere along the line, it was. And so there's actually a fairly simple way to find out what you're getting paid for per hour on those jobs. And we're going to do that by going under our calculators. And in there, you will see the calculator, what do I charge? When you go into that, it's going to open up a very simple spreadsheet, right? And it's what did I charge per hour? So you can actually enter in the data for one of your past jobs, or I'd actually encourage you to do a couple of past jobs and see kind of how you settle out on your individual jobs. So very simple information. First one, what's a job sell price, right? So go back and look at a couple of jobs that you've done recently. We sold this job for $12,000. Next item down is what is the material cost? So in other words, what's the total cost of all the materials and supplies that we had on this particular job? In my case, the equipment, the small supplies, everything else totaled up to $5,600. Now, you need to tell me, what do you use for either a markup or a margin on the jobs, right? So what are you shooting for, right? So remember, if you do a cost times a multiplier, all right, so cost times 1.3, cost times 1.4, cost times 1.5, that would be a markup, right? So cost times 1.5 is a 50% markup. If you use a divisor, so cost divided by 0.6, for example, would be a 40% gross margin. Cost divided by 0.7 is a 30% gross margin, and so on, right? So in my particular case, I'm using a 40% gross margin on my jobs. So I'm going to put that one in. And then last is, how many man hours are you projecting that it's going to take to complete this job? Right? So if you've got 2 guys, 2 days, well, that's 32 total man hours. Simply plug that data in. And at that point, it will tell you, okay, if I have this $5,600 worth of materials and I'm going to put a 40% gross margin on that, that means I'm selling the materials for $9,333.30. Everything beyond that is all labor. So you take that difference divided by a 32 man hours, tells me that you actually sold that job at $83.33 per man hour for those 32 hours that you did the job. Now I encourage you to go through and actually spot check jobs periodically. Are you getting them done for where you thought you were going to, Right now, I would go one step farther. This 8333, let's say you've gone through and you've now checked a half a dozen different jobs and it comes out right around that $83 mark every single time. Then I would encourage you to go back to your software and I would go into setup, go into your individual company department and find that department, all right? So if this is my replacement department, I can simply hit the 3 dots over here under the right under Actions, edit that information. I want to be at a current hourly rate is where I'm going to choose it in my drop down, right? I was kind of blocking that, so I'm going to set it to current hourly rate. And then the amount is, here, I'll get out of that way here a little bit here. Again, we're going to set that to $83 an hour. And by doing that, we now have an accurate hourly rate in our software that it will now start to use. And if I go one step farther, I can now look under reports. And if I run the net profit analysis report, the very first one, I can look at this given department, This was my replacement department. We're set at $83 an hour. We have that set in here. At that point in time, at $83 an hour, I can see $83 an hour will generate $762,000 in total revenue. That'll bring in $145,000 in profit, which represents a 19.14% net profit for this given department. It all carries all the way through. Hope that was helpful. That is this week's Planning for Profit Minute.